Next on KQED Newsroom. Dynasty on display. The Bay Area celebrates another World Series win for the unstoppable San Francisco Giants. And down to the finish line, what's at stake in next week's election? Will California be the first to have drug testing for doctors? Will Berkeley be the first in the nation to tax soda? Plus competitive races, including a state assembly seat representing San Francisco.
David and other people in City Hall have rolled out the corporate red carpet for people like Airbnb.
We've seen companies like Google provide $7 million so that every low-income kid under the age of 18 could pay for.
Good evening and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. After knocking off the Kansas City Royals in Game 7 of the World Series, the San Francisco Giants are the talk of the town. Friday's parade was a sea of black and orange as fans packed Market Street cheering a team that defied the odds to capture their third championship in 5 years.
Oh, I love them all. I love Buster. I love Hunter. I just love all their personalities.
It's been an amazing journey for a club that many counted out after injuries, and a nasty losing streak left them struggling during the summer. Scott Shafer spoke with KNBR pre- and post-game Giants baseball host Marty Lurie about this group of warriors and what's next for them.
Marty Lurie, welcome.
Thank you.
What an incredible October for the Giants and their fans. You were at the parade today. You were in the parade today. What is it about this team and its connection with the people who live in San Francisco and the Bay Area?
Well, in a way, it's sort of an underdog team. No one gives them much credit. They win 2 World Series, and no one picks them to win this World Series. It's a real team of teamwork. They pull together. And as I say, it's 25 people, 25 stories. We like that in Northern California. We're an area that works together. We try to work together. We know how to do things in Northern California, and I think this team works that way.
Somebody said that they play for the name on the front of the shirt, not the name on the back, which I think is really a nice way to say it.
Yeah, there's no I in team, as they like to say.
Yeah.
You know, it's a team.
Yeah. So a lot was said about Madison Bumgarner, of course. Just incredible performance for the ages. He's 4-0 in World Series games, .025 ERA. What's his future? What's his potential?
Well, number one, the records he set as a World Series pitcher go back to Koufax and Gibson and Christy Mathewson and people like that. So it puts you into some perspective of who he is today. If he stays healthy, he is a potential Hall of Fame pitcher. He's another Carl Hubble. He's another Juan Marichal. In today's world, you don't get 40 starts a year. So winning-wise, if he wins 220, 230 games, he could be a Hall of Famer because he's already aced the black ink test, which is he is a postseason hero.
Yeah. I wonder what you think of this. You know, he played so much in part because the other pitchers, Peavy, Hudson, Lincecum, Vogelsong, weren't really up to the task. Is there a way in which he papers over some of the problems that the team faces going forward?
Well, in some way, but they know that. They know that they have an older pitching staff, an older rotation that has to be worked on next year. But keep in mind, he can still only pitch once every 4th day, and that's what he can do. So you have to get the other people pitching. They were fortunate in the playoffs that they never had to go back to the other two in a playoff. Now, in the World Series, they did. They had to go back to Peavy and Hudson, but Bumgarner saved them in the 7th game. They know they've got some work to do in the pitching staff next year.
This is also a story this season of rookies. I mean, this is not the team that started the season. No. Joe Panik, Andrew Susac, and they were homegrown guys. They came from the farm team, right? Yeah. How does that differ from other teams like, say, the Dodgers?
Well, they invest in the farm system, and when they get a #1 pick, you can look at Matt Cain, you can look at Bumgarner, you can look at Posey. They are #1 picks, and they make it. Brandon Belt was a draft pick as well. Matt Duffy came up from AA, and he knows how to play the game. He's a baseball player.
And a runner.
Look, he could score from second on a wild pitch, which is pretty good. And he got a good big pinch hit, too, to bring him back. But the one is Joe Panik. He made one of the plays in the World Series that may be one of the greatest defensive double plays ever started in a World Series. He came up, he hit 300. He is, as I say, a baseball player, #1 pick out of St. John's. They get them ready in the minor leagues to play baseball under the big lights, and they come through.
Yeah, there were so many tremendous moments in this season and the postseason. I mean, Ishikawa's home run, another guy who was a cast-off cut, thinking of leaving baseball. But this is also, going forward now, there are a lot of free agents on this team. #1, of course, the Panda, Pablo Sandoval, the third baseman. What do you think is going to happen? What's it going to take to keep him? And will the Giants try?
It's a really tough question. 2 months ago, probably he'd be gone. Now that they've won a World Series and he's one of the greatest World Series hitters in history, there's a real push to keep him. The market will tell the story, Scott. And what happens when the big boys want a player, it's the Dodgers, it's the Red Sox, it's the Cubs, it's the Yankees, they generally outbid you. And I think for a team like the Giants, they will have a mark for Panda, probably 90 million or so, and we'll have to see what the market does. But they're prepared to have to deal with this. They know what his market's going to be.
Is there a sentimental connection that keeps players in a city because they're willing to give up some money? Absolutely.
Today, I mean, seeing him at the parade and seeing him on the stage and Mayor Ed Lee saying, "Stay here, Panda," and he's waving to the crowd. He is a beautiful connection to San Francisco, but money talks in baseball. The union has a big part of that, and they generally go where the most money is. Now, if it's only a couple of $1 million, they may stay. But if it's 30 million, they're going to go where the money is.
They got 3 rings in 5 years. Yes. You've got 3 rings in 5 years. We took a picture of that ring earlier. That's a heavy, heavy ring.
It is. It's heavy in many ways. It's a testament to me. It was an honor from the Giants to get it for my love of baseball for my whole life. And I get it because of the fans and being on the radio and how they respond. But it is the symbol of the supremacy of your year in baseball. As I always say, when you win a World Series, you have a new member of the family. 2014 will be a member of our Giants family and our personal family forever.
You know, the odds makers are already looking to 2015, and who's the favorite? The Dodgers.
Right.
This is a team that doesn't look as good on paper as they do on the field.
This time of year, they look for pitchers and teams that are sort of complete. And they look at the Nationals with their great pitching staff and the Dodgers with all their stars. So it's a team right now that'll go 100 miles an hour. The Giants may be going 80 and maybe need a pit stop. But when it's all said and done, the best team wins.
That's right. Well, Marty Lurie, thanks so much. How many days till spring training?
Well, about 172, I think.
All right. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Well, shifting gears now to next week's election. With just days to go, campaigns are vying for voters' attention. Governor Jerry Brown, well ahead of Republican contender Neel Kashkari in the polls, is stumping for Props 1 and 2. Criminal justice reform and health care are also on the state ballot, plus 2 local measures proposed to tax soda. Several key races remain competitive, from Mike Khanna and Ro Khanna's battle for a congressional seat in Silicon Valley to the mayor's race in Oakland. Our panelists are Corey Cook with the University of San Francisco, Carla Marinucci, San Francisco Chronicle senior political writer, and Scott Detrow, KQED News Sacramento bureau chief. Carla, let's start with you. What are some of the more combative ballot measures, and what's behind all that?
Yeah, I think the ballot measure, California makes headlines next week. It's going to be on the ballot measures because, look, this could be the state that's the first in the nation to pass a soda tax. Both in San Francisco and Berkeley, they're looking at this. It could be the first state in the nation to mandate drug testing of doctors. That's Proposition 46. Huge, expensive battle. And you talked about Propositions 1 and 2. Jerry Brown's out there stumping for those. That's the only thing he's out there stumping for. He's just
not even stumping for himself.
He's coasting on this election. You know, and I think the wild card with all these ballot measures and tons of money has been thrown at them is who's going to turn out to vote for this, because a lot of people have said you got an electorate that's disengaged, they're angry, they're not into this election, and part of it is because Jerry Brown's race at the top seems like such a slam dunk for him.
Well, who do you think will turn out? Are there any studies done on that, Corey?
Well, you know, we do know that the electorate is going to be older, it's going to be wealthier, it's going to be better educated than an electorate in a presidential year. It's going to be less diverse, it's going to be more conservative. But I mean, some people are anticipating the lowest turnout for a general election in California history, which would be about 50%. And so it could actually be the worst turnout we see in California. And I think if it gets that low, all bets are off in terms of how this plays out, particularly in these races, you know, the state superintendent's race, or these down ballot races where you have two Democrats running against each other, or races with two Republicans. I don't think we know exactly how turnout will affect those races.
When you've looked at the data coming in from people who voted early, though, you see, which is typically the case in midterm elections, Republicans are outperforming their overall voter registration. And that goes with the trend that Republicans, conservatives are typically more likely to come out and vote in off-year elections. I covered a rally at UC Davis this week. President Bill Clinton was there stumping for two Democratic congressional candidates. And he was basically begging the young Democratic college kids who showed up, saying, you have to come to the polls. You can't just vote for president. You need to vote these years, too.
That's right. I mean, so that is one of the sort of wild cards in this whole thing. Look, you've got 2/3 of the California voters who asked to vote by mail. This campaign's already been going on for like a month. Mm-hmm. There is worry. Are the millennials going to come out? Are African American and Latino voters going to come out? And at this point, some of these races where you have two Democrats, such as the Honda Khanna race, are the Republicans going to come out? Right. All of these are going to be interesting to watch on Tuesday.
Well, when speaking of the Ro Khanna, Mike Hondo race, that's an interesting one. That could reshape Silicon Valley depending on how it turns out. I think it's a very important race and one that's not getting enough attention, frankly, because I think this is the sort of the future battle within the Democratic Party. It's sort of the tech versus the sort of the old school labor Democrat. And I think this becomes the template for future elections statewide in California. I think this is the fissure that's within the Democratic Party. It used to be the sort of the labor Democrat would run against a pro-business Democrat, the old DLC, the Clinton Democrats. But now it's about tech, and it's focusing on tech and these issues around affordability and these other things that are happening at the local level. And so I think this is all playing out in this interesting election that will likely be determined by Republican and decline to state voters in this race.
But you also have the interesting thing, I think, on where the Republican Party goes, because we watch, just as that one talks about where's the Democratic Party going, the governor's race, in some ways, Neel Kashkari, a pro-choice, pro-gay marriage candidate, tried to make the case that he wanted to remake the Republican Party. And you know, you've seen him on the stump, Scott, and he's had some controversial moments in this race. And that is going to be, I think, what we're going to be watching. Did he really move the ball forward in terms of the Republican Party in California?
Well, Scott, well, go ahead.
I think that's a good question. Last week on the California Report, I was having a conversation with a couple other KQED reporters about how Proposition 2, the rainy day fund measure, was kind of underperforming in the polls compared to what a lot of people expected. And the argument was this is a bipartisan issue. Republicans endorsed it just as much as Democrats, but the only person you see campaigning is Jerry Brown. The Republicans don't have a prominent person to put out there to stump for Prop 2. And then there was the realization they don't really have anybody who could fill that role. Who is the face of the California Republican Party? It's not clear. Neel Kashkari kind of stumbled this year. I think you could make the argument. There was a big push that Ashley Swearingen, the candidate for state controller, could be the future face of the Republican Party. But if you look at the polls, if you look at the money that she's raised for this election, she's kind of not really gotten to the point that I think a lot of Republicans were hoping for her. And there's a question of whether she'll make it competitive next week. So I think Republicans do have a lot of questions, and there's not a clear person to point to as that's the next Republican governor candidate.
Why is Governor Brown putting so much of his effort into Props 1 and 2? His campaign has spent $3.3 million on ads for those two propositions. Meanwhile, he's only spent about $500,000 on his own campaign. He hasn't run a single TV ad.
Nope, and he's only, Carlo was there as well. He did his kickoff campaign event in the East Bay on Monday. You know, and I checked my calendar. This is the first event of the season, and it's October 20-something. Brown made the argument that he said, look, I'm running for my 4th term. People know who I am. They know what I'm for. They know what I'm against. I don't have to sell myself. But you wonder if there's something else there, if he's trying to prove some sort of point, because he's almost gone out of his way to not campaign. I mean, we saw today that he's not even going to have a campaign rally on election night. Like, he's really taken it to extremes.
It's so unusual. I mean, we really didn't see any talk about, here's what my agenda for the next term. That he really didn't lay anything out at all. You're right, he didn't have to. He didn't have to spend the money. He didn't have to expend the energy, which shows how unusual this campaign has been in California.
But 8 years ago, you have this national election. You have a president who's unpopular at the lowest level of support across the country. Democrats pick up 6 seats in the Senate. They pick up 30 seats in the House. The governor, Schwarzenegger, wins by 17 points in California. The sweep that happens around the country doesn't affect California. This time around, we're looking at Republicans picking up 5 to 8 seats in the Senate, picking up gains again in the House of Representatives, and we're having this non-election in California in the governor's race where he's going to win by 20 or more points.
And this is
it's
where
pretty remarkable.
Some Democrats are not happy with Jerry Brown because they feel that because there's no big, fancy, sexy race at the top, that people are just going to be bored and not turn out.
And some of these down ballot
some of these Democrats are going to lose going down. And
right.
We're talking about the supermajority being at stake. So this is an issue where Jerry Brown could get some heat from his own party, but then again, he doesn't care.
Right. He does have a little bit of strategy in doing this race on the cheap that he's talked about, that he wants to go into his second term with as big of a war chest as possible. And now he has more than $20 million that he's raised that he hasn't spent. And he says that $20 million is what keeps him from being a lame duck, because he can use that money to fight for propositions if he can't get something through the legislature or other political needs in a second term.
Let's talk a little bit about the state school superintendent race as well. Tom Torlakson against Marshall Tuck. That's neck and neck. That's 28% with 44% undecided.
That is a wild race. It's just millions of dollars has been thrown into this race. I think $10 million against Marshall Tuck alone. Tom Torlakson being the incumbent there. Teachers union very much behind him. This is a race where you have Democrat versus Democrat. It's a nonpartisan race technically, but the fact is another race that may define where the Democratic Party is going.
Because Torlakson is backed by the teachers union, and then we've got Tuck, who's got the backing of more conservative folks and the Republicans.
That's right. And this is not the only race where teachers unions have weighed in. We've got some local races too. In the East Bay, Catherine Baker against Tim Sabranti is another one where he used to be the head of the teachers union political operation. The teachers union has weighed in very big for Tim Sabranti, has had Democrats. So,
well, speaking of Oakland mayor's race, Corey, I mean that's
wow,
crazy.
That's
15 candidates.
15 candidates. Their most recent polling shows 3 in more or less a dead heat. The dynamics of the race, initially it was Jean Quan against this fairly undefined field. Rebecca Kaplan, a citywide elected councilwoman, the one citywide elected councilwoman, jumps in the race, changes the race. And then frankly, I'm not sure if it's the governor's endorsement or what's happened since, but Libby Schaaf is now sort of ascendant in the last few weeks. And so suddenly we've had this race emerge as this 3-candidate race. Voters get to rank their top 3 choices. They're trying to figure out how to do that strategically, which is an interesting dynamic, and I think it's going to be a fascinating race.
Do voters even know how ranked choice voting works? Do you think they're clear on that?
I think voters get the basic idea that they should list their favorites, right? That they have a first choice, a second choice, and a third choice. I don't think they have any comprehension of how the ballots are actually tallied, and as a result, you start to hear these theories about, why it is that Jean Quan won when she did, or maybe there are good ways of gaming the system, and they're really not. I mean, for voters, the strategy is rank your top choices in the order of your preference, and it actually works out that way. But there's a lot of confusion, a lot of conversation about it in Oakland.
So definitely not a sleepy election at
No,
all.
I mean, this is one of those races where, absolutely, the voter confusion, the mudslinging, we've seen it, this kind of mudslinging in the Chiu Campos race in San Francisco as well. The amount of stuff that voters are getting in their mailbox is just confusing them, turning them off. It's going to be an election to watch.
And sometimes voters don't know where those mailers are coming from. You have a lot of dark money, a lot of unreported sources of spending.
The estimate is something like $35 million in independent expenditures have been spent in this election. That has completely muddied the waters for a lot of
committees
voters
with the good-sounding names where you can't trace where the money came from.
Okay. Well, all right. You guys are always such a lively bunch. Thank you. Carla Marinucci, Corey Cook, and Scott Detrow. Thank you. Well, turning now to the state assembly seat that represents about half of San Francisco on the eastern side of the city. Carla mentioned it. The 2 candidates for District 17 have worked together for years on the Board of Supervisors. Now, David Chiu and David Campos are locked in a tight race for the seat held by termed-out incumbent Tom Amiano. Both candidates are progressive Democrats with a lot in common, but they're calling attention to their differences. David Chiu supported a tax break for tech giant Twitter in exchange for setting up shop in the blighted mid-market area. He also sponsored recent legislation to regulate but still allow short-term rentals made popular by Airbnb. David Campos, originally from Guatemala, is an outspoken advocate for affordable housing and renter protections. He also voted to allow Sheriff Ross Mercury to keep his job in spite of a domestic violence incident. Scott Shafer sat down with them both recently.
Supervisor Chiu, Supervisor Campos, welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
You know, a lot has been made about how similar the two of you are. You're both Harvard-educated lawyers. You're both progressive Democrats. You have families of immigrants that you're part of. You both have the first name, David, and the same initials. So what's the biggest thing that distinguishes you from each other?
I think the biggest difference between David and I was just illustrated about with what happened with Airbnb. There's a fundamental difference between what David did and what I did, and I'm not surprised.
You're talking about the legislation to regulate Airbnb.
And I'm not surprised that the Mayor Lee endorsed him because I think they agree in that approach. Where I disagreed with David Chiu is that the city legalized short-term rentals, and I'm for short-term rentals, but it didn't require the very basic thing that every business has to do, which is to pay $25 million in back taxes. And it's the same people that are going to benefit from that who are now funding the campaign against me.
That was a criticism. There were amendments offered to force them to pay back taxes. Some say, you know, $25 million, I think. Why did you not support that? Why was that not part of the final legislation?
So let me first talk about the facts. And the fact of the matter is he's absolutely wrong about this back tax issue. I have absolutely supported collecting all taxes on this. All that my legislation does is it requires for the first time online hosting platforms like Airbnb to collect and deliver what will be tens of millions of dollars of taxes, potentially $50 million over the next few years. And there is absolutely nothing to the lie that David Campos has been putting out that my legislation doesn't collect back taxes. In fact, our respected tax collector has said he doesn't need new powers to go after back taxes.
But Airbnb has been very slow to pay those taxes.
Absolutely, and I'm actually the person who ensured that taxes were paid by Airbnb.
Don't take it from David Campos.
All right, let me just change the subject a little bit. The Twitter tax cuts in 2011, it passed the board 8-3. You were a big supporter. You opposed it. 3 years later, would you say that the city or Twitter got a better deal, David? And when I say the city, I mean city residents.
Absolutely, the city. You know, in 2011, our economy was stalled. We had tens of thousands of folks who were out of work. And the area in the mid-market, the Tenderloin area was blighted. Commercial vacancy rates were at its height. It was really Skid Row. And what we did was we created thousands and thousands of jobs. And it cost our city about $5 million of revenue a year. We saw $1.5 billion in new city revenues come to the city to help pay for government services.
The facts don't support that. The fact is that San Francisco has the fastest growing inequality in this country. And the prosperity that David is talking about, the benefits that Twitter got are benefits that have not flowed down to most San Franciscans. Ask the residents of that neighborhood and they will tell you that they have not benefited the way that they were promised.
Would it have been better for Twitter to go to Brisbane?
Well, listen, I believe that we can provide tax breaks as long as there's actually a requirement that they do something. What's happening in San Francisco?
There was a requirement, though, wasn't there?
No, there was no community benefits agreement. In fact, the Citizens Advisory Board that oversaw the tax break has criticized it.
Actually, there's a controller study that has come out that shows that that the tax policy changes that we move forward were absolutely successful in doing what we wanted to see. We have seen these companies not only create tens of thousands of jobs in San Francisco, we've seen $1.5 billion of new tax revenues that have come in to take care of the most vulnerable.
But is it the role of government to sort of change the market, do you think?
Absolutely, because we did not get to where we are because of macroeconomics. David and other people in City Hall have rolled out the corporate red carpet for people like Airbnb, and it's not surprising that now those same people are spending $800,000 against me in exchange for what they just got from David Chiu.
So I have over 30 labor unions that are supporting me. We've got janitors, security guards, food and commercial workers, workers at Walgreens and Safeway and Macy's, who know that they have jobs today because we've moved the economy forward. If it were up to David, we'd be stuck in the Great Recession. Tens of thousands of folks would be out.
So what does this all say about the two of you, and in your case, you, Supervisor Chiu, about what your priorities would be in Sacramento? What would you go up there to try to do?
Well, so my top priorities in Sacramento would really be three. First and foremost, I've been working on moving forward an affordable housing agenda for the past 6 years. I didn't just focus on it this year like David. We've been working to build more affordable housing in San Francisco. David voted against 20,000 units of new housing, including rebuilding public housing and low-income affordable housing. I've been moving this agenda. if all goes well for me on November 4th, I want to go to Sacramento to be able to bring back the resources we need to build more affordable housing. On top of that, our muni system is broken. We have some of the most dangerous streets in the state when it comes to pedestrians and cyclists. We need to do better, and we have to get more funding for our schools. We should reform Prop 13 to get more revenue so we can move our schools forward.
Clearly, affordability has to be the top priority of the next member of the Assembly, but I want to talk about 3 other issues, which I think are the reason why all the educators, the teachers, the faculty at different colleges are supporting me. I think education is the civil rights issue of the day, and we need to improve our public schools. We need to have preschool for every child in California. And I also want to deal with the issue of inequality, and specifically gender inequality. We just introduced legislation, landmark legislation, that finally addresses the fact that a woman still makes 77 cents on the dollar. If you're an African-American woman, 64 cents, Latina, 56. I want to take that issue to the state level and finally have equal pay for equal work.
You know, my sense that you guys, in some ways, you feel that government should have a lighter role in regulating and in overseeing and sort of getting into the market. And you, David, you're more of a free muni for kids, restrictions on landlords, those kinds of things. A really heavy involvement, which sometimes the courts throw out. And so I'm wondering, you know, is that a fair assessment? I mean, are you going to go to Sacramento with that sort of agenda?
So I think the reason why Tom Amiano is supporting me, and the reason is not just because he wants to continue this LGBT representation in Sacramento, but because this is the most progressive district in the entire state of California. We need someone who's going to be a champion for regular people. The reason why David's campaign is being funded by more than any other campaign is because the corporate interests know that with David, they're going to have a friend.
We're short on time, but I'm going to give you just a quick rebuttal to that.
Absolutely. Well, the reason why the San Francisco Chronicle endorsed me, the African-American newspaper, the Sun Reporter endorsed me, the LGBT Bay Area Reporter endorsed me, as well as the Chinese newspaper, is they know that I've been effective at delivering for everyone. I haven't just been working with one special interest or the other. I have been endorsed by the School Employees Association, the Community Tenants Association,
Democratic Women in Action.
Airbnb, yes. Okay, look, we're going to leave it there. I know there's a lot more to talk about, but Supervisor Chiu, Campos, thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that is all for tonight. For more election coverage, including our guide to ballot initiatives, go to kqed.org/election. I'm Thuy Vu. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a good night.